This video will contain spoilers from the off, so remember, you've been warned. Here we are again. Another episode of The Idol, and that same sense of disappointment and feeling that I get every time it's back. I feel like this show has almost turned into a parody of itself. Following on from an episode 2 that looked as though it had some potential in there after watching Lily Rose Depp's character Joss break down over the loss of her mother, this episode tried to lean in on it in the same way as what the previous one did, but it failed miserably. That paired with scenes that were just too much, I thought I'd break down and explain this episode and why it subsequently became the worst of the season so far. So let's get into it. Here is why The Idol episode 3 is the worst one yet. The lack of an actual story. I think something which has become apparent after watching this most recent episode is the fact that we already know the story and how it's most probably going to play out, and there's not that much substance to it. Hence why we tend to have lots of different scenes that are filled with Tedros and Joss being intimate with each other in extremely inappropriate locations, which just doesn't really make sense to me. The only ambiguous thing that was left out there in the show was what went on with Joss's mother, and we had that revealed to us in this installment. We found out that Joss was abused by her mother as a way of her trying to instill focus and dedication into her. However, it was something that now, with her mother no longer around, Joss felt as though she didn't have that focus to be able to create good music. This was where I thought we were going to have an interesting arm to the story, and go down a route that would have made us see things slightly differently. The idea that Joss was suffering at the hands of her mother and that the people closest to her in the industry knew what she was going through but did nothing about it because they wanted to collect a paycheck and keep on the books. It would have really allowed us to see a dark side to the industry and how people almost viewed Joss as a subject rather than a human being. That's an area that would have been an interesting, dark, emotional and sympathetic route to go down and would have shone a light on a mindset that's most probably present in the industry. The fact that people are in it for the money and will pretend to be there for you, but if it gets in the way of them collecting their cash, then they won't step in. But no. Instead, we had Tedros basically saying, "Do you still have the hairbrush that your mother used to hit you with?" And now we've got Tedros mimicking her mother, putting her through pain in order to try and get the best music out of her. It just makes no sense and almost makes a mockery of it. It's actually quite laughable when you think about it. It's so ridiculous. There were some real moments in this episode that did make me cringe as well. The ridiculous moment where Izaak was sitting there singing with next to nothing on, and there was also the conversation about how they all just say yes to everything. Joss was weirded out by it, and I myself as the viewer was too. It just didn't really make any sense, especially considering that they then went on to say no to something after, so it made the conversation absolutely redundant. The secretive nature of Tedros is something that it feels as though the show is trying to make extremely interesting and important, but it's something that I feel we don't really care about, as he's already a sketchy character, so there was never any doubt that he was anything else. Maybe if Tedros was a genuine person, but there was this sense of confusion about his past, it would add intrigue, but I just don't get that with Tedros. I also don't really buy into the idea that Joss believes that Tedros is a musical genius. It was supported in something that she said right at the end, where she explained that she'd been working in the industry for 10 years and that he was new to it. So I feel most people out there wouldn't take advice from somebody who has never worked in the industry or wrote a song in their life, so it's a bit of a strange thing that keeps occurring. Tedros. Oh man, Tedros. The Weeknd's acting ability was something that once again was put into question this week, and I would say that this could arguably be one of the weakest performances. He had so much more screen time compared to usual, and that was what ultimately allowed him to be exposed a little more. The scenes where they were in the clothing store was something that just didn't go in his favor. In this instance, if you had a good actor, you could buy the obsessive nature of the individual and the mystery that surrounded him, but I just feel as though it didn't work with him. The Weeknd basically has two facial expressions that he's able to give Tedros, and it's just not enough when you're trying to give off the impression that you're this serious individual who has a dark past that is very hidden. I feel like that's why he's in sunglasses a lot of the time, as the eyes are so important in acting, so it feels like they just decided to cover them up. Tedros being rude to the store clerk and also Joss's trainer was something that I just didn't really buy either. I'm also confused as to why nobody says anything to him or stands up for themselves. They just make out like Tedros is this invincible, untouchable being, yet he's scrounging off of Joss. The graphic nature. It took about all of 40 seconds of the episode before we had to watch Tedros and Joss all over each other, in the back of the car, in the fitting room in the store, and also in the house. It's like, we get it. We know that they're together in that way. We don't have to see it constantly. I just feel it cheapens the show slightly, and like I've said before, it can be used on occasions to support what it wants to show us. But when genuinely 1/4 of the episode is probably scenes of people just being with each other like that, you start to question what it is that you're watching. The pacing. Okay, so there's supposed to be about 6 episodes of The Idol, which means that we're now halfway through the season. It feels like the story has barely gotten started. Within this episode, we saw Tedros having more of a hold over Joss compared to how we saw it in the previous 2 episodes. The dynamic seems to have shifted from just being with each other intimately to him now being in control of the music that she was creating and him being introduced to her team. This is something that within my mind just feels a little off and unrealistic, but the unrealistic nature of it isn't the largest issue. My issue is, when did this happen? Within the show, we don't really know how much time has passed by, and I think that is what can make the show feel a little jarring to watch. Because in the space of 1 episode, Tedros was now basically in control of everything, and sitting at the head of the table, so it's just a little bit too choppy and all over the place. So was there anything good about it? Well, kind of. Lily Rose Depp proved again that she's too good for this show. Her level of acting is far above everybody else that's in the cast, and it's so clear to see. Her and Rachel Sennett are actually pretty good, and I enjoy it when they're on screen together, because the dialogue that they share feels authentic and I buy into it, plus their performances are strong. It just feels like this show on a countless number of occasions starts going down one path and leans in on a story that could be developed well, such as Joss struggling in the industry due to her mother dying, and even Joss suffering at the hands of her mother but everybody around her choosing to ignore it, and then they just decide to brush past it and not focus on it with the level of focus, care, and amount of detail which would allow this show to actually be considered pretty good. The idea of Tedros, a person who seems to be trying to capitalize off of somebody else's decline in mental strength, is also an interesting concept, but the execution of it just doesn't do it for me. It's too over the top, ingrained with intimacy, and has scenes that just feel too unrealistic. After episode 2, I had a bit of hope for the show, especially after seeing what Lily Rose Depp delivered in terms of her performance. But Lily Rose Depp's performance won't be enough to save the show moving forward. There's only so much you can do when the writing and the direction just doesn't really mean anything. So I guess we'll see how much worse it can get, or if it will improve as time goes on. There's 3 episodes left. So, there you have it. Why The Idol episode 3 is the worst one yet. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.